this is big. This is really big.
Hello and welcome to this edition of FOF Live presented by La Pop. That's LAPOP. You can check them out Instagram, Twitter, and at their Doral location. We have a big stream for everyone here tonight, previewing this upcoming series against the Phillies, talking about that Dodger series, and the prodigal son returns to the Marlins organization in Sixto Sanchez. He's back. Everyone's favorite. Alex Carver already has him ranked number 2, right behind Thomas White. He is ready for this. We'll save that a little later as we're going into break. We can talk about Sixto Sanchez, but first let's talk about this Dodger series. The Marlins took 2 games out of 3 with the Dodgers, something that it seems like 90% of us did not pick. I think Ryan might have been the only one who picked the Marlins to go 2 out of 3, and he also had
Romeo. Him and Romeo both nailed it.
Oh, of course, Romeo. Romeo always goes for like Marlins sweep, 2 out of 3 Marlins. But it was a big series victory for the Fish, including that first game 6-3, 11-4, and then we don't talk about that last one. Never happened. We go ahead and talk to Nick. I want to hear Nick's thoughts overall on this series, taking 2 out of 3 against one of the best teams, if not maybe the second best team in baseball.
Oh, it was so much fun. I mean, you really going into it weren't expecting a whole lot. Like, yes, the Marlins were on 4 games in a row, but it was first the National, so you kind of need to do that if they were going to make a push towards the playoffs. Now going into the Dodgers, it was, okay, let's see if we can survive, maybe scratch one out. That was kind of the thought going into it. But to go out there, win the first 2 games in game 2, I mean, was like the title right there of that article, just a home run derby. They were just hitting bombs left and right. Jazz had an absolutely fantastic series. He was so much fun to watch. The team was just, until that last game, which you said it never happened, the team was just really, really fun to watch. And it felt like, hey, there's a pretty good shot this team might make the playoffs now when you look down the line. And after this series, it's a big win. And now if you could beat the Dodgers like that, 2 out of 3, looking at every single team they play, there's really no one that you say, oh, we can't beat them because we got whooped by the Dodgers. This Brave series coming up soon is going to be a question. But beating the Dodgers is a big thing, and everyone kind of contributing. It was almost everyone, every single game kind of had their hands in buckets, hitting home runs. It was a lot of everything, which really surprised me almost, but I was happily surprised with the series, and it got me excited for this upcoming series.
Yeah, big wins there, especially with the home runs. Eddie Cabrera coming back, pitching a really nice, I believe, 3.5 innings, I think it was, or 4 innings. Eli, talk to us on the home runs. The Marlins needed runs. The Marlins got it. Home runs, it seemed like almost every guy in the lineup at least had one. Just how was it seeing the Marlins actually produce these home runs and against a team that could at any point come back and reach them with, it doesn't matter what the deficit is, against the Dodgers?
Right. Now, the caveat is in the middle game, Lance Lynn leads the league in allowing homers. I had not realized how insane he was in that category. He crossed the 40 home run mark allowed in a season, and there's still some time to go. That's impressive for all the wrong reasons for Lynn. In the first game, they had against Clayton Kershaw. There's really no way to downplay that. That was an impressive effort against him, not so much with the home runs, but working deep counts and getting on base. They drew as many walks against Kershaw as basically anybody does for somebody that still at this stage of his career still has excellent command. That was encouraging as well. Yeah, all things considered, you add it all up and they dead even in terms of run differential for this series against the Dodgers. And that has to be a pretty big win in this case. And doing it, of course, without Jorge Soler and doing it knowing that kind of a hazy situation for that middle game with Edward Cabrera in the middle of it, coming after a few different relievers, having that void in the rotation, honestly. Yeah, with Edward, has to be, as much as the offense did its job in this series, Edward's impressive return would have to be the headliner for me because they need him. He's going to be whether he's going to be in the rotation or not, he's going to be pitching as part of a rotation. So whether he's starting games or pitching after an opener like he did in this case, he's going to be one of their most used pitchers the rest of the season. So he needs to be pretty good because he's essentially filling the Sandy void. He was supposed to be just a new accessory to what they already had and forming somewhat of a 6-man rotation. But now he takes on a bigger responsibility, and he looked great. The first inning was his most troubling one, and then from that point forward, he was pretty terrific in this one. His velo was up a little bit above where it normally is. And it wasn't really a bullpen situation because he did get stretched out to 4 innings. He did throw 70-something pitches here. So this isn't like Edward is in the bullpen where he belongs. They kind of used him as a bulk guy, even though he didn't actually begin the game for the Marlins on the mound. So that was really encouraging with him in terms of just getting soft contact, missing a ton of bats against the Dodgers team that was pretty close to full strength here.
Yeah, and there are major storylines happening before this game, during it, after this series. We can start with maybe the first one. Probably I'm more on the Marlins side, and that was the return of Miguel Rojas coming back to Lone Depot Park. We have an interview, his little press conference scrum on YouTube. Isaac wrote a really great article on Miguel Rojas. Isaac, with Miguel Rojas coming back, how do you see him? How do you think he reacted? His stance on the Marlins now compared to where I was last season, and just overall Miggy Rowe making his big re-debut.
As the title of the article says, no hard feelings. He absolutely adores his organization. He's very grateful for not the one, but 2 contract extensions that they gave him. He still considers this place home. He said he keeps in contact with a lot of the current Marlins, like Jesus Luzardo has become a very good friend of his. Sandy Alcantara continues to be a very good friend, and I assume they, reach out to each other after the news about Sandy, because that's what he said. When something happens to either them or myself, we reach out and say hello. So it was nice to see. The video tribute was very nice. It might have been a little awkward when he came up to bat because he didn't necessarily get a standing ovation, but I think he thought he was going to. But other than that, he had I'm really happy he had a 3-hit game yesterday. I'm glad he had a great game on the field as well as in the batter's box. So that was nice to see, and a very nice guy and a true professional that, is going to be doing big things for this team for the rest of the year.
Miguel Rojas, is he a top 15 Marlin ever?
No.
You'd have to ask. I think Sean Millerick is watching us. He was one. I think he ranked his top 30 Marlins for this 30 season. I'd be curious to see where he had Miggy Rowe. I haven't thought about it that carefully. My gut would say not quite, because even though the volume is there, just the high end quality was not. Aside from that shortened season in 2020.
Yeah, Carver, we haven't heard from you. What is your stance on Miguel Rojas? Maybe after this series, how he performed and how the Marlins looked against their former unofficial captain.
Yeah, it's good to see the guy back. Based on however he left and what circumstances he left on, which we won't go into on the show. But no, it's just cool to see the guy back. He's still around. He's still in baseball, probably towards the end of his career, I would probably say. But back with a familiar team and a playoff-bound team, so he's going to have some success and something to remember there at the end of or coming up to the end of his career, most likely. Being back in Miami, the guy spent a long time here. Isaac in his article said it the best. It's like no hard feelings. Okay, cool. Like you've moved on. Marlins have moved on from you, and cool. Just enjoy the rest of your career. So I definitely wish Miggy the best. Was here for a long time, did a lot of things for the org. So it's cool to see. It's cool to see the guy back and see his face again and see him back in that dugout as you see on the screen. As you guys called out, I think Isaac called out the name of Luzardo. Very quietly, 3 straight quality starts for Jesus Luzardo. And I think in this start, he was really, really good. Again, just spotting pitches and especially that slider. Just this, awesome. 7 whiffs with the slider in this game. Really, really good. I'm so excited about Luzardo and just his continuous improvement. Yeah, he's been through some rough patches. Yeah, he's been up and down. But lately, he's been really, really good. And I think a key piece, especially with the lack of depth that the Marlins have pitching-wise, I think this is going to be a key guy in the Marlins' success. And if they make the playoffs or if they don't, going forward is going to be Jesus Luzardo, especially with the loss of Sandy, who goes to the IL, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But, yeah, Luzardo, again, really, really good. I thought this was an awesome start for him. So, yeah, I'm all in on Luzardo. I think this guy is definitely at his best right now.
Yeah, you got to say that with Sandy on the shelf, he is he is your ace, and I assume that if this gets to a postseason situation, he would get the ball on game one. And he's been so spectacular all year long. You take his first 22 starts, it was, 125 innings. He had a 3.17 ERA. He had that brutal stretch to begin August with 3 horrible starts where he gave up, I think it was 15 runs in his 3 starts. He fixed something, he tinkered something, and then against the Padres, Rays, and Dodgers, he has been phenomenal. Only 2 earned runs in 18 innings pitched. He has really turned it around in a great way that I think, he is a number one for this rotation right now.
Yeah, we just mentioned another guy who potentially has the number one stuff in Edward Cabrera, going 4 innings, 8 strikeouts, limiting to only 2 walks, which is just really a great number for Edward Cabrera. Alex, again, I want to go to you on Edward Cabrera. You just mentioned Jesus Luzardo. Edward Cabrera going 4, 8 strikeouts with 2 walks. How does Eddie just maybe continue that? And while watching, did you see something that he might have fixed in terms, when he was down in AAA to now coming back up to the active roster?
I think it's more of the same, honestly, Danny, from this guy. He has spells like this where he does really, really well, and he has his command, but then he can fall off at any moment. So what I would say that stood out to me from this was his first game that he ever threw out of the bullpen, and he did really well. And it's a guy that can go multiple innings. Obviously now, like we said, with this loss of Sandy and the lack of depth that the Marlins have in the rotation, this may be a guy that they have to push back up into the rotation, and I think it will be, especially because that last game was a bullpen game. So I definitely think this is a guy that will need in the rotation for the rest of this year, but long-term, I think this guy is a bullpen option, and you saw why in this start. Or not start, but outing, I guess I should say. I think he's a bit more effective in shorter stints. I mean, I know this was 4 innings, comes in the middle of a game though, and he looked a lot more effective. Just having that pressure off of him to start a game and hold the 0-0 lead, and or 0-0 tie, I guess I should say, just to be the guy that starts a game. I think this is definitely somebody that could benefit from just moving into a relief role long term. And I think that's where we will see what the Marlins will do with him long term, in my opinion. I honestly do think that's where he's going to be the best long term. But yeah, man, he was definitely good here. 4 innings out of the bullpen, and it looked good. He said 8 strikeouts, 2 walks. But again, like I said, it's just a guy that you don't really know if that can persist long term. And to me, that spells more bullpen than rotation.
There we go. To going from Eddie, go ahead and talk about that last game. Going up against Ryan Pepois, I believe is how you say it. Pepois or Pepois?
Pepio? Isn't it Pepio?
Pepio?
Pepio.
Oh, does not look like it. Oh, well, the Marlins got torched by him, so you can pronounce it any way you want. It was supposed to be Julio Urias, but we all know what happened before the series. That this horrible situation with Julio Urias and everyone involved in that. Was this really bad situation there, putting now on administrative leave. Just with that, how do you think the Marlins fared with going up against Mr. Ryan there in that 3rd game? I can imagine maybe they were looking to face Julio, and then everything that went down there, being put on administrative leave, and now having to refocus and reshift their thinking into a new pitcher who maybe they have not seen a lot of. I believe before this game, he had maybe 10 innings pitched this season, maybe less than 10 innings. So Eli, if you could shed a little light on how the Marlins fared against a guy who did not have a lot of tape this year.
Well, he didn't, even in this game, he didn't miss a ton of bats. His changeup was really good, but he got help from his defense to keep this going as long as he did. What stood out to me is how many great defensive plays, especially from Miggy Rowe and also from Ahmed Rosario in the middle infield. There was at least 3 really impressive sharp grounders that were hit to either side of those guys that needed both really good field work, glove work, as well as a strong and accurate throw in order to keep it going for as long as it did. So that was a big part of it, the help that he got from it. Yeah, otherwise, this is a guy that I think still has a fairly high ceiling. It's just, as you mentioned, he has so little major league experience at this point. And even in his previous experience, the training wheels have been on. He had not pitched beyond 6 innings ever in the majors. And I think he only had 1 outing that was even longer than 5 before this one last night. This is uncharted territory for him. That being said, it was it's not totally surprising. It feels like with this Marlins team, they've done this before where they have either individual games or stretches like they did the whole last week where the offense was as productive as it had been during any 1 week span the entire season. And then it balances out pretty quickly. There's no like gradual, graceful drop off. It usually like comes down in a thud pretty suddenly, just like this. So I wouldn't read too much into it, other than it was kind of just balancing the scale and kind of making up for just a lot of these guys that were clicking at the same time over the course of the previous week. And then you have a game like this where most of them put together lesser quality at bats. I think the main issue you look at is how quickly a lot of these at bats took and how impatient the Marlins were and some of the swing decisions they made. They did allow the fact that Pepe was on the mound as late as he was because he was so efficient, getting balls in play early in the count like that. I'd have to say that the approach against him was pretty disappointing in this one to make his life a lot easier than it should have been.
Yeah,
I would say honestly with this pitcher, Danny. Oh, sorry. I would say honestly with this pitcher, Danny.
No.
Yeah, I would say honestly with this guy, it's so interesting if you look at his like the transaction log on this guy. This guy was on the 60-day injured list. They activated him in August. Since they activated him on August 2nd, he's been optioned and recalled 4 times already from the Dodgers. Like this guy's been all over the place, and he comes up in a pinch and he just gets it done. In the minors, this guy had like if you look at his career numbers, like 300 strikeouts and 100 walks. That's pretty good. Like a 3-to-1 ratio. That's pretty solid. So man, it's definitely an interesting ride for this guy is what I would say overall. Like 298 strikeouts, 101 walks in his minor league career. But like I said, they activate him off the injured list, and he's been recalled 4 times, including this last time here a couple days ago. And then he just goes and gets it done. So hopefully this guy can stick with the Dodgers, because I think he deserves it. But yeah, I mean, honestly, in the stuff, I didn't really see like an ace or anything like that watching this game. I think that the Dodgers were a little bit fortunate to get some good plays on some hard to hit balls. So I don't think the Marlins offense can really be shunned here, but just a good performance by him. And hopefully he can stick up for the Dodgers because he's kind of been all over the place this year.
Yeah, just everything. Maybe to ask you guys, who do you believe was your maybe offensive MVP this series? Is it maybe someone like Jazz, Jake Berger, Josh Bell? Who do you guys think maybe stepped up for the Marlins offensively against the Dodgers?
You gotta say Jazz Chisholm Jr. He had, at the time, it was a big go-ahead. It was a big 3-run home run in Game 2 against Lance Lynn, an opposite field shot. And then in Game 1 of that series, he hit one of the furthest balls I've ever seen hit, 2/3 of the way up the upper deck in right field. It was also an insurance run. He had 3 hits that day against Kershaw, and all of his hits were against left-handed pitchers. I think you got to go with Jazz Chisholm Jr.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't really doubt what he did. Isaac was just saying, a go-ahead home run is huge, and he was just really big in this series. And Jazz has been really hot lately, and you could see how the team kind of goes on offense when he's hot. So I think he's been huge lately, and this push kind of towards the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. And then the last player I wanted to mention before we head into Sixto talk, which who knows how long that will go for, is Mr. Joey Wendell. He heard Eli's article, the slam article on Joey Wendell, and he said, "I'm coming for Mr. Eli Sussman. I'm coming for you." And he did on this. I believe the second game, having a single, a home run, a double, just a triple away from a cycle. He almost gave us a cycle, which is incredible to see. Eli, you wrote the article. Joey Wendell responded, and how do you think he responded to that?
We touched on it before. He hit a home run against the guy that has allowed the most home runs in the majors this year, in Lance Lynn. So it's something. It doesn't carry a whole lot of weight for me. It was, I guess you could say, it was the stoppable force versus the movable object. And so whichever one that Wendell is, he came out on top in that battle. That's somebody that had not hit a home run in about 3 months before that. Yeah, I still feel kind of the same way as I did before, where I just wouldn't play him very much moving forward, at least not as a starter. He still has value defensively on this team. He still has value in very particular matchups hitting wise, but for the most part, I think Birdie is the better all-around player at this stage, and probably so is Garrett Hampson as well, who could at least fake it at shortstop. So we will see tonight. I believe tonight it is Birdie getting the start at shortstop. Yeah, but Wendell's going to stick on this team for better or worse the rest of the year. I can sort of understand that aspect of it. And it was just great for him to have that moment because at least he's somebody that, he's the consummate professional, as we can say as many times as we want to. Although it doesn't carry a whole lot of weight on the field, that's still there's a reason why he's with this team. And all the success that he has, whenever he does, defying the odds, defying everything else, that all the indicators that we're seeing, I'm going to be happy for him whenever he does kind of step up and do that.
And one more thing, I know.
I'd also say, Josh. Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say one more thing.
No, I was just going to say.
Game two. It's the greatest. I got it. Let me get it. Was the greatest bunt single we've ever seen. Because Jacob Stallings, talk about it, had the most beautifully placed bunt single maybe I've ever seen. It was fantastic. And Stallings hustling down the line. That was probably my series MVP would be Jacob Stallings just because of that bunt. I loved it. Go ahead, Carver.
Okay. The last thing I would say on this, outside of Stallings, the last thing I would say is Josh Bell to get out of a 7 for 35 by hitting a home run and getting a hit in each game of the series. This guy that struggled lately, he's had a rough kind of 2-week stretch coming into this series, but to get out of it with a home run in the first game and then get a hit in each of the next 2 games as well. Cool. It's cool to see. Definitely the Marlins have a lot riding on this guy. They brought him in to try to win. So to get a hit in each game, to get out of that kind of schneid that he was on is good to see. So hopefully he can keep that going here.
But isn't there a way that Miami loses that trade, Carver? Elaborate. There's a way that they lose that trade, right?
There's a way. There's a way. I'm not saying it yet, though.
All right.
We'll get to that later. We'll talk about that way later down the line. People want to hear the important stuff. The reason that they came here and here to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Sixto Sanchez, as reported by Jordan McPherson of the Miami Herald. Sixto Sanchez will join AA Pensacola on the road. He has a bullpen session scheduled for tomorrow. So if there is a meter on how back Sixto is, where is that meter? Is it all the way to the right? Is it in the middle? Is it 25%? How back is Sixto Sanchez?
Like 2.2.
2.2 on the back meter. Okay,
So
better than where it was a month ago.
some things need to still happen in order for him to actually join Pensacola. I don't think we'll see him pitch for Pensacola this year. Maybe we will. But even if that happens, man, you're not going to see the same product that you saw in 2020. From what I've heard, it's not going to be pretty, and I wouldn't be surprised. Like it's been reported already that we never see him throw again in the major leagues. But we'll see. There's a reason why Kim has been adamant about keeping him on a 40-man and taking up a valuable 40-man roster spot. So maybe they know something that we don't. But when you ask how back is he, it's not more than 2.2 out of 10.
Well, I do want to clarify. We're almost certainly going to see him pitch for Pensacola in an organized game. They would not have sent him up to Pensacola unless he was pretty close to actually joining their team and going to games. My anticipation is that if things go smoothly with his bullpen session, then he'll be activated next week to actually pitch in some sort of game. Yeah, they wouldn't have bothered to send him there unless they think he's really close to actually appearing in a game. So that is the big discrepancy between appearing in a game versus close to helping the Marlins. He is not close to helping the Marlins as best as we can tell. This is simply about 2024 and beyond. This is about the off season. This is about, figuring out whether he's actually worth a 40-man roster spot. You can argue that already to this point that perhaps they could have gone away with DFAing him or at least hiding him on the 60-day IL, that maybe they should have acted sooner. I'm somebody that's of that opinion as well, that the ship has kind of sailed here. But this is a little bit of a validation of their process, that it does seem that he's on the verge of appearing in an actual official minor league game, which is something that he has not done in like 3 years. The last time he pitched in, I guess what you could call an organized game, would have to be spring training 2021. Right after that, he went to the alternate site in Jacksonville, and he hurt himself pitching in a scrimmage in that game, and he has not, progressed to this point since then. So this is the farthest. This is a big milestone for him to reach this point after 2.5 years absent from it. my expectations are extremely low, but my level of intrigue to actually see him pitch in a minor league game, hopefully next week, that's I mean, that'll be extremely highly anticipated, even though, yeah, expectations are low. I don't think he's stretched out pretty substantially at all. Like, this is somebody that if I had to predict, I think he's going to be pitching maybe an inning or two at a time at most, probably 2 innings at a time at the max, that they're not going to stretch him out as a starter. They're not going to, I don't think he's going to have the opportunity to pitch very much before the end of the minor league season. This is about figuring out whether or not he is even worth, having as a flyer in the organization, having on the 40-man roster throughout the offseason or not. And I think that's still to be decided in these final few weeks, is actually to see how he looks, to see whether his stuff is anywhere in the same area code as what it used to be, or whether he can somehow still perform well even with diminished stuff. So we're going to find that out, and I think that will actually have some ramifications as to whether or not their patience with him actually continues through another offseason into another spring training. I think this is now his time to prove himself a little bit.
Yeah, his velo is up to, last time we checked, 94.
Yes.
I mean, really compared to how it was 2020, not the same pitcher at all. Carver, go ahead. Sixto, he's number 2 on your top 100 big board. Talk to me.
Yeah, maybe number 200. I don't know about 2, but yeah. Just to add on to what Eli said, I wholeheartedly agree with what he said, that I don't think this guy's going to be a starter. I don't think he's going to be a starter for the Wahoos, but you do have a little bit more time with the Wahoos because they will be in the playoffs. So you got at least a couple more games to get him some time. So they won the first half, so they will be in the playoffs, which extends their season by at least 2 games. So at least there's 2 more games where maybe he gets a chance to maybe pitch out of the bullpen. So yeah, no, it's just a barometer. You just got to see where he's at. Is he ready to come back and pitch in major league or minor league games at this point, or pro games, I guess I should say. This guy hasn't pitched in a pro game since 2020, right? So, I mean, except for spring training. So, yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see exactly where this guy is. I mean, we all know the meme with Sixto is 60 feet, 120 feet, 40 feet, whatever it was. Now we're going to see him in a pro game. So I'm excited to see exactly where he is and to see what the Marlins do with him long term. Just being completely honest, I'm not high on this at all. I know they still have to try to get something out of the Real Muto trade, and this is the last ditch effort that they're going to have. The Marlins still see something, which is why he's still on the 40. Is that going to be corroborated in these couple minor league games? We'll see what happens. But I'm not overly confident, honestly. I think at most this is a 1 to 2 inning bullpen guy long term.
Sixto, just an anomaly that he's been since that 2020 run he had. Eli, on Sixto, when him getting up to AA, what do you hope to see from him? What would be a positive sign for Sixto Sanchez? And maybe you mentioned just 2 innings of work or 1 inning.
Bobo.
Yeah, you want to see him have some sort of resemblance to the guy that he used to be. And aside from velocity, one thing that separated him as a prospect is just having really terrific command of his stuff. We saw that in the big leagues during his brief sample as well. So, like, in terms of whether he has any sort of future with this team, I think the base level of that is being able to throw strikes and be able to throw them pretty close to where you want them. I'll be focused on that pretty intently as well, because when it comes to making that decision about whether or not he should even be on the roster heading into the offseason or whether you should simply cut him, I think that at a bare minimum is what you want to see, that he's able to actually get ahead in counts and throw that stuff for strikes. Yeah, my expectations, again, are pretty low, because when the most optimistic figure that the team throws out there is 94 miles per hour, just to remind you that this guy was sitting 99 in the big leagues before his injury, maxing out at 94 versus sitting 99. Those are completely different players. Like, that's not encouraging. I guess when you float it out without any context, it sounds kind of encouraging. It is the closest that he has been apparently ever since this rehab process began. But this is not going to be, from anything that we've heard and rumblings we've heard, this is not the same player that it used to be. If he's going to have any level of success, it's going to have to come a different way. It's going to have to be using more of his secondary stuff instead of relying on his fastball velo. And he does. He used to have really great secondary stuff, especially his changeup. So yeah, I'll be looking for a lot of things. Yeah, just trying to point out any sort of parallels I could draw between the guy that he is, the guy that he used to be. Of course, the one thing we heard entering this year is his commitment to getting in shape. He finally trimmed down and lost some weight compared to what he used to be. Some of us read a little bit too much into that in terms of what it meant for his baseball career. That'll be interesting to watch, and actually seeing him taking up less space on the mound than he used to, even when he was actually a highly regarded prospect. Yeah, but it's going to be a different player. That final hurdle before appearing in games is throwing that bullpen session tomorrow. But yeah, we're getting close to seeing him. And I'll just reiterate, this is not about 2023. This is not impacting. Most people here want to focus on the wild card chase, and this guy is not going to be a factor in that under any circumstances. It's just not enough time, and he's just not close enough, even if things go well during these closing weeks. But it is tantalizing, of course, that the dream of them salvaging anything from the player that he used to be, considering how much value he used to have before these injuries. There are some cases where guys just get totally derailed by these injuries, and it looks like he is somebody that is going to fall down that path, but at least he has now reached a stage where this is progress, the most simple way that you can put it. So yeah, the fact that he's a little bit closer to that we're going to have some validation on camera in an organized game of him actually participating in said game. It's going to be a spectacle. And that'll be just something new for us to split our attention between.
As a last, before we go to break,
right.
Danny, as a quick last on this before we go to the break, Eli just pointed out so well, he's only up to 94. He used to be up to 97, 98. He did have that great changeup. From the brief video that we've seen on Sixto Sanchez, we haven't seen that. We've seen him throwing from a side view, and it's fastball. We hear somebody in the background saying 94 or whatever it was, those videos that we've seen from Jupiter. You want to see how he comes back and starts to at least try to re-implement the breaking stuff, because he's going to have to use that a lot more, especially if he's only up to 94. Unless he comes back and somehow he's at 97 and he just fooled us all, that would be great. I don't see it. So he's definitely going to have to re-implement the breaking stuff, especially that changeup that he used to have. So does he still have it? That's definitely going to be something to watch for in this, I guess, glorified rehab stint that he's going to go through with Pensacola. So yeah, it's going to be fun to see him whenever he pitches. We don't have a date, but it's going to be fun to see him whenever he gets into a game, presumably next week per Jordan, but see how he does tomorrow, see how he gets up there. And then, of course, once he throws, we'll probably have multiple eyes on it. So we'll see what happens with him. But I like Eli, I'm not overly confident.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to go ahead and head into our break. But before we do, Eli, do we have a flipped fish at all for this series, or are we flipped out?
We're flipped out. Isaac was slacking on that, or unless he comes in right here with a last ditch idea.
Do we have a last one?
I thought about it because we had the Phillies. They didn't actually haven't played that recently. We were flipped out today. I'm sorry.
It's Sixto Sanchez. Come on, that's your flipped fish. It's Sixto Sanchez. Now we can go to break.
You wouldn't have worked.
Well, Alfaro works. Jorge Alfaro from the same trade.
Juan Pierre. You could have got Juan Pierre. Darren Dalton.
Juan Pierre.
JC Real Muto.
Placido Polanco. All those guys you could have picked for flipped fish. So, but we'll have you back for the next series.
We'll have it definitely for Milwaukee because the Marlins haven't played Milwaukee all year, and that should bring a fun one. Obviously, we're going to stay away from the Yelich ones and the Brinson ones, but absolutely the Milwaukee one should be a really fun one because we have
pick Wes Obermuller. Do Wes Obermuller.
Williams.
Another one I like for this series is Andrew Bellotti. Barely noticed him when he was with the Marlins, and he was good for the Phillies last year. I have not followed him much this year, so I think something went. I think is he hurt? He's actually he's back on the active roster this year, but he hasn't been particularly good for them this season.
Or
right-handed reliever.
Gene Segura. That's the real answer. Gene Segura. Who knows what he's doing now? But what we're doing is heading into break. So after we come back from the break, talk about this Phillies series Can the Marlins stop the home run hitting Phillies and Bryce Harper full-time first baseman? Come back after this break. Uh-oh. And welcome back here on FOF Live, presented by La Pop. Now we are previewing this upcoming series versus the Philadelphia Phillies. And do you guys remember at the trade deadline when the Marlins and Phillies were neck and neck? Well, though it seemed like both of them were just inching for the wild card spot. Well, the Phillies have overtaken the first place wild card spot. It looks like that might be theirs. The Marlins are 4.5 games. 1 game behind the third wild card spot. Phillies are 4.5 up top. So it looks like maybe too much there for the Marlins to overcome, unless they could potentially get a sweep on the Phillies. But it will be difficult heading over to Philadelphia. It seems like this team is just hitting home runs after home runs. It seems like the chemistry is put all together for this series. Nick, Philadelphia Phillies, Kyle Schwarber has been hitting home runs. Bryce Harper looks really comfortable now playing first base and even looking to a permanent switch there. Just how do you handle the Phillies? Is it too much for the Marlins? And the Marlins are like doing their homework just against the Phillies.
I mean, the Phillies have definitely gotten scarier since Trey Turner decided that he wanted to play like a shortstop that's getting paid what he is. So that's been a lot scarier for the Phillies as they're coming into this playoff push, and he's a real reason that they've been able to really take over here. And yeah, like you were just saying, all those big names, Kyle Schwarber, right at that top of the lineup. It's just 4 huge guys up there with Schwarber, Harper, Trey, and Castellanos. And when you look down their lineup either, it doesn't really get any easier. Bryson Scott has had a really good year. Alec Bohm can easily have a really good game any day of the week. And Realmuto's right in there. It's a top to bottom, really, really good lineup. And especially those first 4 are just absolutely outstanding. Yeah, like you were saying earlier, they were locked in right back and forth. Marlins were ahead of the Phillies for a lot of the year. And then right at that All-Star break around a couple weeks ago, they were kind of tied up. And now the Phillies have really pulled away from the Marlins and in this wild card race. But the Marlins do have the ability to sweep, which is possible. I don't see it happening with just like the firepower in this Phillies lineup. I think one game they'll really connect and it'll just happen. Sometimes that will happen. So I don't think they can have the ability to sweep this series, but I think it'll be a really good series. And the Marlins pitching is going to really have to come up big. And if they don't, Marlins hitters are going to have to put up those 6-7 run games again somehow.
Yeah, and with the Phillies, I wanted to ask Eli probably about maybe the most underrated player on the Phillies roster. If you go by Baseball Reference WAR, he's technically the best player on the roster. Bryson Stott with a 4.5 WAR. Just what is he doing to just accumulate this WAR and really be one of the most underrated players, maybe just in the entire National League amidst a whole lineup of all-stars and future Hall of Famer?
Well, the simplest factor is that he's playing every single day. They kind of unleashed him after last year. He had a decent rookie year, but he was used in pretty strict platoon situation. They didn't have the full trust in him. A lot of that started early in the year with Joe Girardi, and I think you can trace a lot of his improvement just to the change in leadership there to Rob Thompson. And this year, taking a very big step forward, as you said. The fact that he's now hitting lefties just as good as he's hitting righties, while being an above-average defender at second base, while being a very good base runner, has 27 steals in 29 attempts, even more steals than Trey Turner has this season. And Trey Turner is, you could argue, the fastest man in baseball. And it's Bryson Stott that's been just as valuable, if not a little bit more, as a runner than even Turner has been to this point in the year. Just another regular that for a team that has built a lot of this lineup just from free agent spending and just by bullying teams around as a big market team. You could say that about Schwarber and Trey and Harper and Castellanos and even Real Muto, paying what it took to retain him long term. Stott is a homegrown guy. I remember very vividly when he was a draft prospect, and we were thinking, hey, maybe he's going to fall. The Marlins are going to pick him with their first round pick. I believe it was the JJ Bleday draft that he went in, and he won a few picks after Bleday did, but obviously turned out to be the more complete player, the far better player in here. And now he's every single day he's in there for that team. Like, to a lesser extent, Johan Rojas is somebody that has come out of nowhere this year. They made a pretty aggressive promotion to call him up about a month and a half ago. And even though that, nothing really jumps out about him, he doesn't hit the ball super hard. He doesn't have a ton of power. He's been incredible defensively in center field. And he's also another good base runner that they have. So that the fact is, there's just no holes in this lineup. The only hole in this lineup is when JT sits for a day. So maybe he'll sit for one of these games and they put in Garrett Stubbs in there. And even Garrett Stubbs, by his standards, I think is having a pretty solid offensive year. Yeah, even Garrett Stubbs this year is hitting 220 with a 583 OPS. So that would make him the best catcher on the Marlins if he was on the Marlins, you could say. Extremely deep lineup, especially recently, that power surge you mentioned where they hit as many home runs in a single month as almost any team ever has. And it was Trey Turner that was leading the charge, but Schwarber right behind, and then a bunch of these other guys not far behind that. So that is the big storyline here. It's just a relentless lineup here. It's really not that far away from being in the conversation with teams like the Braves. Maybe I think it is in a similar tier to a team like the Dodgers that the Marlins just got done facing. You can hold them down on particular nights when the stars align, but it's very hard, if not impossible, to contain them for 3 consecutive games, especially when they're at home.
Yeah, and I remember when they signed these guys, I believe just a few years ago, going into those seasons, it seemed like the biggest question would be how would they fare defensively with guys like Castellanos, Harper, Schwarber, maybe guys who aren't essentially the top defenders at their positions. I'd like to ask any of you, whoever wants to respond, just how do you see this team maybe defensively? I know when we had Alex Carr, he mentioned Nick Castellanos is having probably his best defensive season of his career. And, now we're seeing Bryce Harper at first base. And how do you guys think this Philadelphia Phillies team is handling themselves defensively? Because we could tell by just the offensive numbers how well they've been.
You've seen guys take a step forward at a few different spots. Alec Boehm at times has been unplayable at third base in the past, and I think you could say that he's improved from where he used to be. Bryce Harper is the really fascinating one because he is playing an entirely new position due to his still recovery from Tommy John surgery. So for the rest of this year, they don't want him throwing at full intensity, and that's why he's playing first base. And the early returns have been solid, even though he doesn't have the same reach as your ideal first baseman. He's been fine defensively. I think you'd say that he's the best. He's not quite Yuli Gurriel, but I think there's a lot in common with somebody like Yuli on the other side at that spot. And the big development for them has been with now most of their outfielders healthy, and the fact that now Harper can play first base almost every single day. It opens up the DH spot for Schwarber. It is comical how bad he has been in left field this season. Depending on how you slice it, his defense has gone a long way towards totally negating everything that he does at the plate. It's been that bad where he just can't make the routine plays. He can't come close to making the challenging plays. And now down the stretch, they barely have to use him in the outfield. They now have that DH spot vacant for him. That's a huge development, allowing him to focus on what he does best right here. So that's where the Johan Rojas, the emergence of him, and now Brandon Marsh being healthy after a brief IL stint, that's where everything comes into play that now allows these guys to keep raking. And their defense is still pretty mediocre, but it's way improved from where it was a year ago when, of course, they were able to go all the way to the World Series, even with that fatal flaw, that alleged fatal flaw, that was not enough to hold back all the other things that they do well as a team.
That's something I wanted to mention on this team, and Eli just called out the name of Brandon Marsh.
Oh, I was about to bring him up.
How good is this trade? They traded him for Logan O'Hoppe to the Angels. 1-for-1. Look at what this guy is doing with a 130 WRC plus and 3.3 WAR. That's got to be one of the best trades in a long time. Just because of exactly what this kid is doing. And I know the Marlins were in on him at that time. And what was it, 2022?
That was
Marlins had eyes on him.
Max Meyer,
really
I believe, might have been the name floating around there.
Yeah. And look at what this – I mean, they had to move him from center to left. Like, I don't really think he's a center fielder, honestly. So they have him in left field. But that's fine. Like, look at what this kid's doing at the plate. And he's still so young with a lot of control. Like, that is a fabulous trade right there for the Phillies. And I think this kid's going to be good for a while.
Yeah, it really fits everywhere there. Nick, talk to us about another Nick Castellanos. What have you seen from him? You know, this is the guy that can either strike out 4 times or give you 4 hits with 2 doubles and 2 singles. How do you see him, and maybe with the Phillies entrusting him to have that 4 spot? And I believe he's mentioned he was really disappointed in how his first year with the Phillies went, but now he's kind of maybe reinventing himself to the point where he's really proving himself to that contract he signed.
I mean, Nick Castellanos, you look at him as you can keep him in that 4 spot, especially with how big of a power threat he kind of used to be that first season with the Phillies. He already has almost near double, and he probably will end with double the amount of home runs he had last year. He's actually perfectly in line. He played 136 games last year. He's at 136 this year already. So he's passing his on-field games at least, which is already a positive, being on the field more. And he should around double his home runs. He's at 22 right now. Imagine he gets to 26, which would be double his home runs. So just a huge bonus to the Phillies to have that kind of Nick Castellanos back. And the plus side that we were saying, his defense is at least a little bit better. You're never going to expect Castellanos to have great defense out there in right field because he's not a phenomenal defender. He's not super quick. But if he can give you at least good enough defense out there and he can put enough bat on the ball and keep himself going, he's still going to have a high K rate, probably a low walk rate, but he's going to hit the ball. He's going to have those nights where he does have 4 hits. He's going to go 2 for 4 with a home run. He's going to get you big clutch hits, and especially sitting behind Bryce Harper and Trey Turner, he's going to have a lot of times where he's got runners on base where he can have opportunities to get RBIs, hit doubles in the gap to really get guys going and get guys home. So I think he's just a huge bonus to the Phillies, and he's one of those guys that could really carry you through a playoff run if he gets hot.
His one big issue, and the reason he would fit so well with the Marlins, is grounding it to double plays. I think 16 of them this year. He had a game recently, earlier this week, he grounded to 3 double plays in the same game. I think that's something even the Marlins haven't had an individual player step up and do that all in the same game the way that he did. So he's been prone to that kind of throughout his career. That's the only thing that sometimes holds him back, is how often he elevates the ball. If he did it more often, then especially playing at Citizens Bank, like, he could be really successful there. Sometimes he gets into these spells where it's just too much on the ground or too many low line drives. But yeah, otherwise, pretty good player. Same offseason, of course, when the Marlins signed Avi Garcia. He cost a lot more money, but I think he may have been worth a little bit extra the way that it is now playing out, especially in year 2. Greatly improved from where he was last year.
I miss Dave Dombrowski looking at this lineup. Like, look at how many trades they've won. Marsh, Real Muto, Trey Turner, like all of those trades they won. And then look at the free agent signing.
How have Mike Lorenzen been doing? Sorry to cut you off, Alex, but another guy, just really quickly. Eli, how has Lorenzen did? I know he had the no-hitter, but how has he been maybe since that? Because that's another guy maybe the Marlins could have used instead of trotting out Johnny Cueto against probably one of their best pitchers.
Yeah. He had the no-hitter, and then I smartly traded him in our fantasy league because I was not expecting him to sustain that. He would have helped the Marlins a little bit, but he's been inconsistent since then. He had an outing, I know, against the Padres where he allowed at least 6 earned runs. I'll just go through the game log to double check. Yeah, allowed 7 runs, 6 of them earned. He's at least been giving them innings for the most part. You know, he had one outing right after the no-no where he was terrible against the Nats. In all his other games, he either has gone 5 2/3 or longer than that. And of course, you remember that he pitching a month ago against the Marlins head-to-head. That was his debut as a Philly, and he pitched 8 great innings in that one. Overall, he has helped them a little bit. for the Marlins in hindsight, now that they have Sandy down, it would be even more valuable than you could have anticipated to have him around to deepen that rotation. He's not going to pitch in this series, though. The probable starters for these next few days,
Sanchez,
it looks like, we have Christopher Sanchez and Yuri tonight. It's going to be Aaron Nola and Cueto in Saturday's game 2. And then it's Ranger Suarez on Sunday. We're not really sure what the Marlins are doing on their side of that. It thinks it's probably going to be a glorified bullpen day. We didn't even mention the big news of today of the Marlins selecting the contract of, can you name this player without looking it up?
First one to get it gets a shout out. Gets a let's see, come on.
That's the newest Marlin. If he gets into a game, it will be his major league debut. But because we are short on time, I will reveal this is Emmanuel.
You have to spell
Emmanuel De Jesus.
There you go.
Yes, it's not Emmanuel. It is an N before the M in his name. And he has been Carver's not especially enthused about this move. It's not as if he earned the promotion. He's just a fresh arm. He replaces Devin Smelter here. I think it's a strong likelihood that he pitches as a bulk guy on Sunday, assuming he's not needed on Friday or Saturday. You can't assume, though. That's kind of why they don't announce these things ahead of time. It's because you never know when he might be needed in relief these first 2 days if things go pretty badly. This is going to be a big challenge. We're still early on in this stretch of 16 games in 16 days, the longest such streak that the Marlins have had all year. And it comes at a time where, their pitching depth is really questionable. And you could say that there's a big risk of them being exposed for that lack of depth at this time of year, the way that things have unfolded. So even though this is not a guy that we put high expectations on, there's a lot of pressure on him to, when he is needed, to give them length, to allow the other guys, the more high leverage guys, to be relatively well rested down the stretch. We've seen with this team, one of the main differences from the glorious first half to the pretty shaky second half has been the relievers not performing as well as you would want in those high leverage situations. 1-run games not going their way. And really the easiest explanation is that those guys have been worked really hard, including guys like David Robertson for his former team coming over to the Marlins and now regressing at the worst possible time. So every single arm in this bullpen has responsibility in order to keep the rest of those guys available when you absolutely need them.
Yeah. Going with him and Emmanuel De Jesus. How do you guys believe the Marlins can handle themselves pitching-wise in this upcoming series? You know, we have Yuri. Then we're going to have Johnny Cueto going up against Aaron Nola. Might be a very difficult task there, even though Aaron Nola is not having an Aaron Nola-type season. How do you guys believe the Marlins can continue maybe hammering the Phillies in terms of pitching-wise? You're not going to have, obviously, no Sandy, no Jesus Luzardo, no Brax with this pitching rotation going up against Phillies these 3 games. How do you believe they can handle themselves?
It's going to be a very tough test for Yuri Perez. We know that he, pitched great against LA, had a bit of a tough start against Washington, gave up the 3 home runs, and none of them, I guess one of them was a couple of them were on mistakes, but this is going to be a very tough one, especially, mentioning Schwarber, Harper, Castellanos. I think Schwarber is almost a lock to hit maybe one at least today. Oh boy. But yeah, that's going to be a really tough test on the road, especially at the city of brotherly love. It's going to be a tough one for him. But yeah, Miami's going to have to at least salvage one, in my opinion. We'll get to predictions soon. But I think I'm really, really intrigued to watch Yuri Perez tackle this lineup tonight.
Yeah, it'll be very difficult there. We mentioned the last times he's gone against maybe these power lineups, the Dodgers. We all know what happened with the Braves so long ago. But again, this will be very interesting to see how Yuri does against this lineup. Anything else you guys want to mention before we head on into predictions? I know it's an earlier start time compared to before. So any last thoughts, Marlins related, Phillies, Sixto Sanchez, maybe what he had for dinner, just anything you guys want to mention?
No, just for De Jesus, I can give you just a really quick what you can expect. Very low velo, 90 to 92 max. Does have 4 pitches, but the true issue is command. He's had a lot of issues with command. That really is the main issue that's led to his near 5 ERA in the minors. I would expect this is a short stint. They just need the fresh arm, as Eli said. But as you're talking about with pitching, they have a worn-out bullpen. They've used this bullpen a lot, and now without Standy, you can't count on him for 7-8 innings again. Like it's really going to come down to guys, as we said before, like Luzardo, maybe Yuri stepping up and getting these innings away from the bullpen to where you don't have to go to a guy like this. So I understand this call-up, but as Eli said, it's more just in terms of this guy was slated to start tonight for Jacksonville. It's a guy that is definitely fresh. It's a guy that is definitely ready to pitch if they need him to, but I wouldn't expect too terribly much just in terms of what he's done this season. But it's cool to see a guy get his big league debut. It's always cool to see that. So I hope he does get into a game so at least he could show it off. We don't have another like Sean Reynolds or who was that? The other guy they did it with that they called up and didn't pitch. Parker Bug, right? Parker Bug.
Yeah, Parker Bug.
So I hope we don't have another situation like that. Yeah, I hope he gets into a game and he can at least make the most of his time here with the Marlins. So at least he can show what he has. But that's what you can expect. I didn't really agree with this move. I understand it, but I don't agree with it because there's so many other guys down there that really deserve this chance, especially for a winning team. But I do understand the need for length, and that's where the Marlins are right now for pitching. So you're going to have to see guys step up. Yuri tonight. Luzardo is another one who did it the other night. Hopefully he continues that. But, yeah, pitching right now is a question mark for Miami. I didn't think I would say that at this point in the season, but that's where we're at.
All right. So I think with that, it's a perfect time to head over to predictions. So, Eli, let's get that video.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
Prediction time. Don't forget, for when we do prediction time, it could be Marlins, Phillies, who wins the series, how many games, and your MVP. And your MVP does not have to go with your selection. So you could say Marlins sweep MVP Garrett Stubbs, which might be a Noah, maybe previewing, spoiling his selection there as we're looking over our super subscribers. A lot of Schwarber counts, Alec Boehm, which isn't a bad one there. I kind of like that one. Bryson Stott. It looks like it's 50-50 maybe in terms of Philly and Marlins winning. Looking at it.
Pretty much split down the middle right here. Yeah. I'll reiterate that in the unlikely event that these teams are tied at the end of the season, this weekend is going to determine the tiebreaker because they entered today 5-5 in their season series against each other. This is the final meeting between them this year. It would be pretty miraculous if the Marlins were to catch the Phillies in the standings, but this is obviously a critical step for them to do that. They would absolutely need to win the series. Realistically, they'd need to sweep the series, I would think, in order to really bring that situation into play. Phillies firmly entrenched in the first wild card spot. I think the Marlins would be plenty happy if they just sneak in as the third.
And do we have the leaderboard to see who's in first place? I know there's a big change up the top right now.
I think this is the most updated one that you are now looking up at. Super subscriber Williams right here. I was passed by Ryan Schlesinger recently.
Yeah, Ryan went off last series. I think he was the only 3 perfect selection.
Yeah, he went perfect in here. It's time is running thin, man. It's gonna be tough to catch up. I'm reaching the desperation stage if I'm gonna stay in this one. But yeah, you and Grant still very much alive. All our super subscribers encouraged to participate as well. If you wanted to participate down the stretch of this year, or of course next year, or during the off season, I have some ideas planned for the off season as well. Series. Yeah, right near the top of our website on fishnonfirst.com. Just become a super subscriber for as little as $3 a month, and that's one of the many perks of it.
All right, now let's get into predictions. All right. First up, Kevin's not here, so we're going to have the next youngest one go up. Enter Nick.
That's crazy. All right. So being a little bold here, I'm not being bold because I know it's going to happen. It's going to be Marlins 2 out of 3. And tonight, Garrett Hampson is going to be the MVP because he's hitting a home run in the 9th to give them Marlins the lead. It's happening.
Ooh, Nick is coming. He wants that first place. Alex.
Ooh, man, that's a bold prediction right there. I will say the Phillies get 2 out of 3. I just don't trust the Marlins pitching. The Phillies are, of course, amazing at home on offense because of where they play. And their pitching splits actually favor them at home as well somehow, despite where they play. So I will go with the Phillies getting 2 out of 3. And we've been talking about this guy. So, yeah, I mean, I will go with who were we just talking about? The guy that I want to pick. Oh my God.
Emmanuel
I'm forgetting his name.
DeJesus.
No, not Emmanuel DeJesus. Brandon Marsh, MVP. There you go. You may have to edit that, Eli, but there you go. Brandon Marsh.
All right, Isaac.
I hate agreeing with Carver, but I believe that the Phillies will take this series. It'll be a closely competitive series, and the Marlins will lose 2-3, and the MVP will be Bryson Stott, who is scoring a 300 batting average against the Marlins this year.
All right, Bryson Stott, good pick there. I'm going to go ahead with everyone else. I think the Phillies take 2-3. I think they're the way better team. They're going to out home run the Marlins this series, and they're also going to out stolen base to steal base against the Marlins this series. I'm going to go with Trey Turner, my MVP. He's going to have 6 hits this series with 5 stolen bases. Eli.
Phillies win 2 out of 3. Put the Marlins' aspirations to catch them in the standings on life support. Alec Boehm will be my series MVP here. In this deep lineup, he sometimes gets overlooked, but he has that extra base power. He could be a timely run producer to the Marlins' detriment here.
You said that last time. Didn't you pick him before this year?
I'd have to look up. I have the full history of it somewhere here. If I look back at, let me just quickly see what we did. The last Phillies series, which was the 3-game set, of course, in Miami. I had JT as the MVP. It was actually our guest Alex Carr who picked Boehm as the MVP, and Boehm was the MVP the last time these teams met. And actually, I had not remembered that. So maybe that is how it buried into my head subconsciously, is keeping track of all that stuff.
But we do miss Alex Carr. If you're watching, we do miss you. We want to have you back. We need to have you back for at least one more time before the season ends. But that's going to do it for tonight for FOF Live presented by La Pop. For myself, Daniel, for Eli, Isaac, Internet, Alex Carver, go watch this Emmanuel DeJesus 5-inning no-hit performance coming up. So stay tuned for that. Always go fish.